One of my favorite stories about this affect with the modes is a story about there was a king who had his army was about to go into battle, and he called up the court musician and said, "We're about to go into battle. I want you to play probably, I don't remember the exact modes, but I'm going to guess probably uh, could be Phrygian, something that the mode for battle and war. There's one mode that supposedly enrages you and gets you ready for battle, right? So the king says, "I want you to play that music in that mode for the troops to get them ready for battle." But the musician screwed up. So what the court musician did, he accidentally played music in a mode that was not intended for riling up the troops to send them into war, but instead was intended for to be played for adults before certain adult activities. Let's just say a very amorous kind of mode. He played that for the troops instead. My guess would be that would be Lydian, but so the troops didn't do so well. They obviously lost the battle because they were preoccupied with something else, and it was a bloodbath. This is just one of the many stories about how these modes affected people back then. Now, you might argue that it could be true that modes affected people that powerfully back then because they were much more sensitive to it because they weren't hearing music all the time like we are in our society. So in our society, we're like always hearing music. So perhaps our senses towards these kinds of things have dulled quite a bit. That's one argument for it. That's a whole other can of worms that we're not going to go into. Anyway, so ancient Greeks, they have the modes. Now, we don't really know historically if what they called the modes is the same as what we now call the modes. The names are probably kind of jumbled from where they were, and what notes are what is probably a little different. There's some historic things that went different. But let's jump ahead about 400 years, and what's now happening in the early Christian church is that all music, and actually art in general, but music is being associated with different events in the Christian tradition. So there's music for this kind of service, there's music for that kind of service, and particularly in like a mass and things like that. So the modes get used to be kind of the thing that differentiates the different church services, because pretty much all music back in this time was run by the church. The church kind of had a monopoly on music making and definitely music writing at the time. So we had music like this that you're seeing on the screen. This is chant, and this music that you're hearing. This is kind of how it was notated. It kind of looks similar, right, to what we're looking at. There's only 4 lines, and there are these little squares, but you can kind of see a flat symbol. You can see some other stuff. I'm not going to go into how to read this. It's actually fairly complicated, but this is kind of an early predecessor to our kind of notation, and it uses modes. So what they're doing here is showing, yes, you're singing all of the pitches, which we could call, for the sake of argument, the C major scale, but then this one is altered, and that gets you to a certain mode, something like that.